السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. Welcome again to one of our Friday halaqas, where we're continuing the seerah of the Prophet Musa عليه السلام, his story, and we're taking, alhamdulillah, like a prolonged approach to analyze a lot of the things that are mentioned in the different surahs, and we take lessons from it. And so far, where are we in the story? We just had it last week, Jama'ah. Where are we? Those who stayed awake. Good. Yeah, and then he received the revelation, and then we took the surahs from the verses from Surah Taha about the requests that Musa alayhi salam made. Remember that? So the dua of Musa alayhi salam, the requests he made, and we mentioned when we talked about that Musa alayhi salam made that request because perhaps this is what is needed, or he feels that it's needed to accomplish the task that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ordered him to do. You guys remember that? Yeah. And with the request of also sending with him Harun as an assist with him, وجعله أجد به أزري وأشركه في أمري. You guys remember all that? Yes? Yes or no? Do you guys remember that? طيب, alhamdulillah. Okay. So this is where we stopped essentially, right? Wallahu a'lam. طيب. Now the following one, we talk about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the following words we're going to mention then provides Musa alayhi salam with certain things that will assist him in his role, right? And so this is a continuation of Surah Taha, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to Musa alayhi salam, اذهب أنت وأخوك بآياتي ولا تنيا في ذكري اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى فقولا له قولا لينا لعله يتذكر أو يخشى قالا ربنا إنا نخاف أن يفرط علينا أو أن يطغى قال لا تخافا إني معكما أسمع وأرى فأتياه فقولا إنا رسول ربك فأرسل معنا بني إسرائيل ولا تعذبهم قد جئناك بآية من ربك والسلام على من اتبع الهدى إنا قد أوحي إلينا أن العذاب على من كذب وتولى. So we'll take that first portion, and it is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after he told Musa alayhi salam that you have been given your request, and he mentioned the favors that he has bestowed on Ibrahim and Musa alayhi salam, how he's his gave wahy to his mother, and his sister had followed him, and how he I chose it for myself, and he made that whomever looks at Musa alayhi salam love him. So he's showing him the care that he has provided Musa throughout his life, right? And then he gives him, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders Musa alayhi salam in that part. He said, اذهب أنت وأخوك بآياتي, right? Go you and your brother with my signs. Okay, the signs, the ayat that he gave him, right? So there were two miracles that were shown to Musa alayhi salam. What are they? The staff and the hand. Good, excellent. وَلَا تَنْيَا فِي ذِكْرِي. And he told them, وَلَا تَنْيَا فِي ذِكْرِي, which means don't weaken or don't snack in my remembrance. Okay? Yes. Excellent question, Sheikh. Right? صبرا جميلا سنأتي إليه إن شاء الله. Right? We'll get to it. Right? Inshallah, we're explaining. I'm going to take that verse, inshallah, each one, and we'll deduce from it. But that's a very excellent point. Right? Jazakumullah khair. And if I don't mention it, remind me, please. Because it does have a connotation. But also over here, what is the dhikr over here? What does it mean? What's the benefit of it? Why was it there? All these things, inshallah. So inshallah, we're going to mention. Jazakumullah khair. Barakallahu feek. طيب. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told them, go you and your brother. So initially the conversation was, the order was to Musa alayhi salam initially. Now the order was to Musa and his brother Harun. And so he told them, go with my signs and do not weaken, right? Or do not taniya, which means yad'uf, or to reduce or to weaken or slacken in my dhikr, in my remembrance. اذهبا إلى فرعون إنه طغى. Go to Fir'aun. Why? Because he has transgressed. Right? وقولا لها فقولا له قولا لينا لعله يذكر أو يخشى. And speak to him in gentle speech, perhaps that he may be reminded or fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, when this happened, they responded, they said, قَالَ رَبَّنَا إِنَّا نَخَافُ أَن يَفْرُطَ عَلَيْنَا أَوْ أَن يَطْغَى. They said, oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we indeed, or our Lord, indeed, we fear that perhaps He might hasten in punishment, or that He will transgress. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told them, لا تخافا, don't fear, إِنَّنِي مَعَكُمَا أَسْمَعُ وَأَرَى, indeed I am with you, right? Both of you, I hear and I see. So go to him and say, right? Inna rasula rabbika, we are both the messengers of your Lord. فَأَرْسِلْ مَعَنَا, send with us the children of Israel. And who is Israel? Who's Israel? Yaqub, right? So the children of Yaqub, which was Israel, and do not torment them. وَلَا تُعَذِّبْهُمْ. We have come to you, جِئْنَاكَ بِآيَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكَ. We have come to you with signs that prove our statement from your Lord. وَالسَّلَامُ عَلَى مَنِ اتَّبَعَ الْهُدَى. And peace is upon those who follow the guidance. Okay. Indeed, right, it has been revealed to us that punishment, right, إِنَّ الْعَذَابَ عَلَى مَنْ تَوَلَّى مَنْ كَذَّبَ وَتَوَلَّى. Punishment upon whoever denies and turns away. Right. So this is now if you look at this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave instructions to Musa alayhi salam and Harun. Right? So it gave instructions to both of them before they stand in front of Fir'aun. Now you have to remember, the person that they are going to encounter is a person who believes that there's nobody above him in terms of telling him anything. Whatever he desires happens, and the minute he's upset, what happens? Heads roll. طيب. The minute he gets upset, heads roll. That's it. No need for anything else. We mentioned last time the story of Musa alayhi salam when he was a child and he pulled on his beard. He called the executioner, right, on a child. And we're talking about a person who has no problem of killing infants, right, so that he would secure his position. So this is the type of person that we're talking about. And it's not very easy to stand in front of a person like that and tell them that you are wrong. Okay, it's not that easy. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructed Musa alayhi salam and Harun after they have requested what they feel would make easier for them their role. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the reality of things. He knows the apparent and the concealed and how His creation works. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them specific instructions, perhaps that might assist them in the role that they have to fulfill. And it's not an easy role, right? And so the first thing over here, He said, اذهبا إلى فرعون إنه طيب اذهبا بآياتي ولا تنيا في ذكري. So go with my signs. And the first thing He told them is, do not تنيا في ذكري. تنيا means الفتور, which means to kind of reduce or slacken or weaken in my remembrance. طيب. So I'm going to mention that first because you had mentioned. And so He told them, when you stand in front of Fir'aun, go to him. When you stand over him, do not weaken in my remembrance. طيب. What do we learn from that? Right? So essentially, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling Musa, you are standing in front of a person, right, who is from the oppressors, the biggest oppressors. A person who has strength, who has support, who has everything that he needs to do whatever they want. And so what is the thing, when you stand in front of a person like that, emotionally and psychologically, how would you feel? Yeah, you remember last week we said Musa alayhi salam asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to release his tongue, right? Because when you stand in that position, is it easy to speak? It is not easy to speak, right? It's not easy because you are worried, you are afraid, you're intimidated, right? That's fear factor. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him here that solution. When you stand in that position, what do? Remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because that is going to essentially allow a person to, that is the treatment, right? That is the solution, the ilaj, right? The treatment that is associated with this is to not weaken in this, because that is the only way that we can believe, or we have the support, the imanic support that will give us the courage not to worry about these things, but continue. because we remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? When we remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in times of states of fear, it affirms our hearts, right? أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ. With the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, hearts are settled. They reach tranquility, right? And then also we get this invigorating strength because we remember who has more strength, the creation or the creator, right? When you have the creator on your side, then that is the support that never sleeps, that never weakens, right? That never does not know, is unaware what's happening. That is the ultimate support that you would ever have, and that gives that person that reminder. But it also gives us a awareness and realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what's happening in that position. And whatever's going to happen was meant to happen. That's it, right? And so it really has a powerful effect on a person. So this was the first, the first thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructed Musa alayhi salam and Harun with, is that they would arm themselves with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Don't worry about that figure. There is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who is more powerful than anything else, right? طيب. Yes. 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 I'll get to it, wallah, inshallah. We'll get to it, inshallah. It's in the order of the verses, right? طيب. And then subhanahu wa ta'ala said, اذهبا إلى فرعون إنه طغى. So he told them why they're going. They're going to Fir'aun. Why? Because he طغى, transgressed. Now remember, we mentioned also last time that طغيان is something that is far and above, right? And we talked that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, part of the purpose of sending messengers is to eliminate huge errors and huge falsehoods and oppression that happens, and there's nothing greater at that time than Fir'aun. In fact, he was given the example of the epitome of transgression, that is Fir'aun. Right? When the Prophet ﷺ was talking about, he said, in every ummah there's a Fir'aun, right? And Fir'aun ummati Abu Jahl. The Fir'aun of my ummah is Abu Jahl. And so Fir'aun right now became the symbol of oppressors, because of how much he oppressed. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Musa to that. But what I want to point out over here is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he told Musa alayhi salam, اذهب إلى فرعون, and he gave him the reason, he said, إنه طغى. He provided Musa alayhi salam with an objective, a purpose of why you're going to Fir'aun. You guys can agree with this or disagree? Agree or disagree? Yes? You're thinking, ya Sheikh. طيب. So he gave, but the point is, he explained to Musa alayhi salam, he gave him a goal, an objective of a purpose. Okay? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided him with the means, the tools. Okay? And so the tools is what? One, وَلَتَنِيَا فِي ذِكْرِ. And the second one is قُولَ لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا. Right? How do you speak to him? Speak to him in speech that is gentle. Right? Speak that is gentle. Okay? And so why are we mentioning this? Because we can never, as human beings, accomplish anything unless we have an objective, a goal, and the means to reach that goal. Right? A person who doesn't have a goal, would they achieve anything? No, right? They wouldn't achieve anything. It's not, what are they going to achieve? There's nothing to achieve. Now, if a person has an objective and a goal, but doesn't have the means to achieve it, will they achieve it? No. So as human beings, whenever we need to succeed, we need both. That is subhanAllah, one of the things that we can, usually the scholars, they refer to it as lamahat tarbawiyya, right? I don't want to use the word educational, but things that nurture, or things that are, when you raise people on something, this is like a side of it that tells people, if you want to teach them how to succeed, you have to give them a goal and a way to get there, right? This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, He told us why He created us. We created us to worship Him. And He told us our end goal is Jannah and the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided us with the means to get to there. Not just that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also warned us of the pit holes that on our ways, the hurdles that can prevent us from reaching that goal. Right? And so as Muslims, we have everything that we need to succeed in this world and the hereafter. Especially that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also told us to, nu'ammir al-ard, right? To establish this earth, essentially, to build civilization with the objective of worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So part of the objective is to also build this earth as a means to the hereafter, but also within the boundaries, and the objective is to please Allah. Right? And so we have everything we need to succeed. And this is, subhanAllah, one of the things that we see from those few verses that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling, Musa alayhi salam, He gave him an objective, He gave him the means. Right? طيب. Yes. طيب. Why did we say, what is one of the reasons that Allah sends messengers? To remove, I know, but also to remove oppression, right? طيب. So He informed him, اذهب إلى فرعون. Why are you sending him? إنه طغى. In the Arabic language, Sheikh, facts also have أسباب. طيب. Talk to him, he's lying. Why are you talking to him? To make him stop lying. اذهب إلى فرعون إنه طغى. Is that clear? Exactly, right? Objective, right? The طغيان is on Bani Israel, right? So one of the reasons is so objective and the means. Because if I'm going to talk to Fir'aun, I need to convince him to stop that. How am I going to do it? وَنَتَنِيَا فِي ذِكْرِي وَقُولَ لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا. Gentle. There is a couple of things I want to touch on regarding this statement from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or instruction from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to speak with Fir'aun in a gentle speech. Okay? With gentleness. The first is that, if you notice, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He sent Musa alayhi salam, He's not sending him to a righteous person, or a person who has some good deeds and some bad deeds, right? He sent him to Fir'aun, and you need to be able to talk to a person like that. Does Fir'aun deserve, in our opinion, somebody to be gentle with him? We don't think it is, but still Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructed him. Right? But what does gentleness over here in speech mean? Right? It includes a lot of things. It includes not belittling the other person in front of you, right? Not scoffing them, not speaking over them, like in terms of like a higher position, right? This is the type of gentleness that includes. Similar to how, so for example, he's not going to talk to him and say, don't you have any sort of brains? What do you think? Why do you think you're the Lord, right? That's not gentle speech. In fact, that's most likely going to make that person not accept the da'wah. So in the process of us calling others to Islam, or generally speaking to people, we have to implement this whole thing aspect of being gentle when we talk to other individuals, because gentleness, subhanAllah, stirs a specific instinct in us. Right? Even when a person desires to be aggressive, they're sometimes surprised by the gentleness of the other person, especially, for example, if they smile. Right? It does affect them one way or another. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking both of them, right? In fact, actually, I kind of just remembered. Khalid ibn al-Walid, who had accepted Islam after the Sulh al-Hudaybiyah and before Fath Makkah, right? After Sulh al-Hudaybiyah and before Fath Makkah. And the reason he had accepted Islam, because of how gentle the Prophet ﷺ was with him. Even though, by the way, Khalid ibn Walid, for example, he was a brilliant tactician in warfare, right? He was one of the reasons that it turned the tables over on the Muslims on the Battle of Uhud. He's not somebody easy. Like he did a lot of damage, but yet the reason he accepted Islam is because when the Prophet ﷺ came to Mecca, he actually asked about Khalid ibn Walid. So the brother of Khalid ibn Walid had accepted Islam, and he asked about him. He asked, where's Khalid ibn Walid? He said, he's not here. He said, inform him I was asking about him. Right? And I'm stating that he has an intellectual and intelligent mind. A person like him would not be oblivious of Islam. That's all the Prophet ﷺ did. His brother went to Khalid bin Walid and informed him that. Khalid bin Walid came back and accepted Islam. That's all it took, right? That's all it took, subhanAllah. Gentleness has a key that is very valuable that we can utilize. And so, yes. إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة وجادلهم بالتي هي أحسن, right? I was going to mention that right now, subhanAllah. Sheikh, I think you should, you're reading my mind, mashallah alik. طيب. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did say that, right? And so he said, Ud'u, call to the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bil hikmah, with wisdom, wal maw'idat al hasana, right? And good and excellent admonishment. وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي أَحْسَنَ, and debate with them with what is better, right? And so even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he was addressing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you were faddan, which means foul in your speech, غليظ القلب, harsh or stern in his heart, then people would disperse from around you. That's even if you have the truth with you. So even if you are correct and you are right, sometimes how we deal with things can make people not accept that right. طيب? And so this is something like we were looking at. Now the other thing is when we're talking about over here, the second part is some of the scholars of tafsir, when they were looking at this, is they said that the gentleness is in the approach, not the content. Is that understood? Which means gentleness doesn't mean you change the sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Doesn't mean that you change the legislations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because in the end, this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If a person sees it as harsh, it doesn't matter. It's from Allah, who is the most merciful. Your subjective opinion is invalid. What are the measurements that are being used? So for us to be gentle with individuals doesn't mean that we alter or change the da'wah. We don't do that, right? We hold firm to the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We hold firm to the rules and regulations of Allah, but we deliver it in the best way possible, most gentle way possible that we can, right? Now the third thing that I have to touch on is that even though I said gentleness, that is the default, is that something that is constant, 100%? No. We have to understand this. لِكُلِّ مَقَامٍ مَقَالٍ. For every state, there's a statement. For every state, there is a statement. And this is very important. Because unfortunately, like even when people talk to other individuals, it's like, and I see this a lot from when a person is giving da'wah or talking to other people or counselors or whatever the case is, whatever the situation is, or even with parents, we advise parents all the time, for example, to be gentle, right? We advise, obviously, to walk in the footsteps of the Prophet ﷺ, especially when we talk about religious figures, spiritual figures, or leaders, to be gentle, right? But does that mean those individuals have to always be gentle? Unfortunately, what is expected is that these people 100% have to be gentle. You yell at them, they turn the other cheek, right? They accuse or they say something about you or accuse your credibility, that you're gentle. That's not how it works, right? لِكُلِّ مَقَامٍ مَقَالٍ. Even the prophets themselves, yes, the default is you start with gentleness, but once you reach a certain point, then a tone always has to change. Something else has to come with it. There was harshness, and a lot of the times from the da'wah of the messengers, when they reached a point that it requires harshness. Similar like parenting. When you parent children, you're gentle with them, but sometimes you have to be stern. And whether we like it or not, people are like children. That's the reality. People are like children, right? You teach them constantly with gentleness, you have a Fir'aun in front of you, right? That's the reality, because they think they can walk all over you at any time. The minute you step the foot, they're like, what is this? You're so harsh. Well, you put me in a position to do that, right? If you were aware of your boundaries, then this would not be required. This happened with Nuh alayhi salam. This happened with Ibrahim alayhi salam, right? And this happened with Musa alayhi salam. It happened with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, right? We're talking about the most gentle human being to ever exist, the Prophet ﷺ. At moments, he took harsh positions and harsh statements to his companions, including towards Abu Bakr or Umar, for example, right? Because the situation required it. And this is something we have to understand. It's a balance, right? Yes, the default is gentleness, right? Certain situations, it requires that tone to change. And we have to we address this. And this was actually seen in over here, Musa alayhi salam. When he said, when he told them, when he was talking to Fir'aun, he said, وَالسَّلَامُ عَلَى مَنِ اتَّبَعَ الْهُدَى, right? And peace is upon the one who follows guidance. And then he said, وَإِنَّ قَدْ أُوحِيَ إِلَيْنَا أَنَّ الْعَذَابَ عَلَى مَنْ كَذَّبَ وَتَوَلَّى, right? That it's been revealed to us that punishment is upon the one who denies and turns away. That's a shift in speech, right? You went from gentle, السلام على من اتبع الهدى. Punishment is upon the one who turns, right? Who denies and turns away. That's a warning, right? Nuh alayhi salam, when he was talking about his father and making dua for him and asking him, but then when he realized otherwise, right? He told his father, you and your أنت وقومك and your people لفي ضلال مبين. You guys are astray. But if you look at, subhanAllah, that's not how Ibrahim alayhi salam initially spoke to his father. I think, remember, who was with us when we talked about Surah Ibrahim, when the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, Ya abati, right? Ya abati, Ya abati. And then, وَتَهَجُّرْنِي مَلِيًّا قَالَ سَلَامٌ عَلَيْكَ سَأَسْتَغْفِرُ لَكَ رَبِّي. That's how Ibrahim alayhi salam was. But it reached to a point where he told him, إِنِّي أَرَاكَ, you and your people are ضَلَالٌ مُبِينٌ. That's it, right? And I'm saying this because we have to be realistic about what is expected from people. But once again, I'm going to reiterate this again. The default is gentleness. But we as people who interact with others that are gentle, right, we have to be careful not to use that as an excuse of weakness and keep pushing. Yes. But that was still in a gentle way, right? But when he still refused at the end, so it's as a warning, right? So this was also a shift, right? Wallahu alam. طيب. So essentially this is a warning, like almost to Fir'aun. He said, you are a liar, so a punishment, be careful, punishment will befall you. Wallahu alam. طيب. اذهب أنت وأخوك ولا تنيا بذكري اذهبا إلى فرعون إنه طغى فقلنا قولا لعله يذكر أو يخشى. طيب لعله يذكر أو يخشى. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to Musa alayhi salam, speak to them in gentleness. So I finished the 3 points I want to talk about gentleness. Moving to the next point is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling Musa alayhi salam and Harun to be gentle in their speech. Why? Perhaps Fir'aun, what happens to him, that he would maybe reminded or fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Type, be reminded over here, right? What does that mean? But then fear. Type. Ibn Ashur had an interesting take on this. He said over here, لَعَلَّهُ يَذَّكَّرُ, to remember, is more of to take heed, lessons, right? From, so to take heed and lessons is not يَتَذَكَّر, which means to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by your tongue, right? But to take heed and a lesson and awareness of what might happen, especially if we're talking about previous nations, right? So when he's reminded of that there is a Lord, that there's a punishment, that he will take heed of this, right? So once that happens, once he is reminded of this, either end result will be that he would realize definitely that he is wrong, or the second possibility is that he would have doubts, am I right or am I wrong? And that doubt would lead him to investigate what is right and what is wrong. Right? So either results would be beneficial, obviously. So if he realizes that he is wrong, then that will drive him to do what is correct. And if he has that doubt, it will direct him to seek what is correct. طيب. Now, when they responded to Musa and Harun, they responded to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by this call, by saying, قَالَا رَبَّنَا إِنَّا نَخَافُ أَن يَفْرُطَ عَلَيْنَا أَوْ أَن يَطْغَى. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, indeed we are afraid that he might يَفْرُطَ عَلَيْنَا, which means al-ajala, to hasten, right, in his punishment. Because the minute he's going to see them, what he's going to do? Off with their heads, right? أَوْ أَن يَطْغَى, or that he will transgress. So Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He said, قَالَ لَا تَخَافَا. Don't fear. إِنَّنِي مَعَكُمَا أَسْمَعُ وَأَرَى. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, over here when He said, I am with you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being with individuals is of two different types. This is what's called al-ma'iyya al-amma, the general, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala generally being with people, and that is with His knowledge, right? And with essentially with His knowledge. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so He's with us, He knows everything, that He sees all and He hears all. That is one category. But the other category, which is more of al-inaya al-khassa, right? More of the special kind of being with an individual. This is, they call it like ma'iyyat ihata wa nusra, right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is more like a supportive and protective form of ma'iyya. So there's the ma'iyya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the general believers or the human being that He knows and is aware with them, right? And then the ma'iyya al-khassa, which means Allah is with you in His protection and guiding you to what is best for you and keeping away from what is harmful. This one over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He told them, لا تخافا, don't fear, I am with you, innani, right? The increase in the tawqid, verily I am with you, and I hear and I see all this is an affirmation that you are protected, that you have nothing to fear. So this is the ma'iyya khassa, right? The special, the unique kind of togetherness with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, Qatada, rahimahullah, when he was commenting on this, he commented something interesting. He said, whomever fears Allah, مَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهِ يَكُنْ مَعَهُ. Whomever fears Allah, Allah would be with him. وَمَن يَكُنْ اللَّهَ مَعَهُ فَهُوَ الْفِئَةُ فَمَعَهُ الْفِئَةُ الَّتِي لَا تُغْلَبُ وَالْحَارِسَ الَّذِي لَا يَنَامُ. So if the one who is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with him, then he is with the group, right? مع الفئة, the category or the group that would never be defeated, because they have the al-haris, which means the guardian that does not sleep. وَالْهَادِ الَّذِي لَا يَضِلُ, and the guide that does not lead you astray. Okay? Over here, Musa alayhi salam obviously symbolizes that form of taqwa. And so with him is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the guardian that does not sleep, and the guide that will not lead him astray, and the victorious group, because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is supporting you, you will succeed. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala generally in this category essentially is or in this ayah, right? He gave them the means and He confirmed them the protection and He told them how to speak. طيب. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructed Musa and Harun to say to Fir'aun, إِنَّا رَسُولَ رَبِّكَ, right? فَأَرْسِلْ مَعَنَا بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ وَلَا تُعَذِّبْهُمْ. We are the messengers of your Lord, and so send with us Bani Israel, and do not oppress them. So this tells us what was the objective of Musa alayhi salam. It is to be a prophet to Bani Israel, not to the Coptics, not to the natives of Egypt, to Bani Israel. And so he's telling them, I'm not sent for you, but I'm still advising. Because as a messenger, you still advise individuals, right? Because they are oppressors, they're transgressors. A person has transgressed, done something wrong. So he is essentially advising Fir'aun to be careful what you are doing. Take heed of what you are doing. I am the messenger from your Lord. Now, if Fir'aun followed Musa alayhi salam, is that something wrong with that? No, right? But the main people that Musa alayhi salam was sent to were Bani Israel, right? To elevate the oppression that has befallen them. طيب. قد جئناك بآية من ربك والسلام على من اتبع الهدى. We had come to you with signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The miracles, because we made a claim and we have the proof to support us. والسلام على من اتبع الهدى, and peace is upon those who follow guidance, right? Follow guidance. Now, what about the people who don't follow guidance? Is there peace for them? Is there peace upon them? The people, so Allah, Musa alayhi salam said, وَالسَّلَامُ عَلَى مَنِ اتَّبَعَ الْهُدَى. Peace is upon those who had followed the guidance. What about the ones who don't follow the guidance? The other verse, the following verse, right? Right? The other verse. إِنَّا قَدْ أُوحِيَ إِلَيْنَا أَنَّ الْعَذَابَ عَلَى مَنْ كَذَّبَ وَتَوَلَّى. It was revealed to us, right? So Musa is saying, it is revealed to us. We were informed. So we're not the ones saying it. We're not the ones doing it. We were informed that punishment will be upon whoever denies and turns away. Right? So this is something that's important because when you're talking to Fir'aun, you are not threatening Fir'aun because of yourself. You're telling him, أُوحِيَ إِلَيْنَا. That is our Lord that revealed to us. So this is coming from who? From Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, you can. It's not the, of course, it's not the entire purpose. Yeah. So it is mainly to Bani Israel, right? إِنَّا نُرِيدُ أَن نَمُنَّ عَلَى بَنِي إِسْرَائِيل. We want to bestow our favors upon Bani Israel and establish them in this earth. So it was directly to Bani Israel. Now, of course, on the way and the path does not mean that, of course, one of the easiest way is that Fir'aun will be guided, so the oppression will be lifted, right? We can always say, of course, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also sent Musa to call Fir'aun to Islam, right? فَهَلْ لَكَ إِلَىٰ أَن تَزَكَّ وَأَهْدِيَكَ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ فَتَخْشَى, right? And so no one is denying that, but the main objective, he was sent to Bani Israel. Wallahu a'lam. طيب, how did Fir'aun respond? How did Fir'aun respond to that? That is the continuation of the verses in Surah Taha, right? So the way, it's kind of interesting how Fir'aun responded. He said, فَمَنْ رَبُّكُمَا يَا Musa, right? قال ربنا الذي أعطى كل شيء خلقه ثم هدى قال فما بال القرون الأولى قال علمها عند ربي في كتاب لا يضل ربي ولا ينسى الذي جعل لكم الأرض مهدا وسلك لكم فيها سبلا وأنزل من السماء ماء فأخرج به أزواج من نبات شتى كل ورع أنعامكم إن في ذلك لآيات لأولي النهى منها خلقناكم وفيها نعيدكم ومنها نخرجكم تارة أخرى ولقد أريناه آياتنا كلها فكذب وأبى. And so the meaning of this verse, or these few verses, is that Fir'aun responded to Musa by saying, so who is your Lord? قال من ربكما يا موسى. Who is your Lord, both of you, يا Musa? Did he respond to Musa's questions or calls? He didn't. He just said, who is your Lord, both of you, يا Musa? And so Musa عليه السلام responded, ربنا الذي أعطى كل شيء خلقه ثم هدى. I'm gonna use what's mentioned in the English tafsir books, but I'm gonna comment on this a little bit because in Arabic it has an interesting dual meaning. Okay, he said, "Our Lord is He who has given each thing their form and guided it." And then Fir'aun responded, "Then what is the case of the former generations?" And so Musa alayhi salam responded. He said, "علمها عند ربي." Its knowledge is thereof with my Lord. In a record, في كتاب لا يضل ربي ولا ينسى, and neither my Lord neither errs nor forgets. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? He said, الذي جعل لكم الأرض مهدا وسلك لكم فيها سبلا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has made the earth for you a bed that is spread out, and He has inserted therein roadways. وأنزل من السماء ماء, right? And He brought down from the sky a water by which it produces different forms of vegetation. أزواج شتى. كل ورع أنعامكم, eat and pasture your livestock. إن في ذلك لآيات لأولي النهى. Indeed, there are signs for the people of intelligence. منها خلقناكم, from this earth we have created you. وفيها نعيدكم, and to it we will, and into it you will return. ومنها نخرجكم تارة أخرى, and from it we will resurrect you or extract you another time. And we certainly showed Fir'aun, right? ولقد أريناه آياتنا كلها. We showed Fir'aun all our signs, but he denied and he refused. ولكن كذب وأبى. طيب. So Musa, so over here, let's look at this. Fir'aun responded, he said, قال فمن ربكما يا موسى. This was the response of Fir'aun when Musa had called him. He said, who is your Lord, both of you, O Musa? So over here, Imam Razi, so one thing we want to reflect on is Imam Razi, he said, he pointed to something interesting. He said, Fir'aun kana shadid al-batsh. So Fir'aun was very, strong in his responses. Like he would essentially, did not tolerate anything. Remember, if he gets upset, heads roll. Is this what happened in this situation? No. Why? Isn't it kind of weird? It's different. Exactly, right? You expect him to get angry and they say, that's it, like, executioner. We found the person who killed, like, the Coptic. He came here, take him out. So what changed? Why? Now they're having like a debate. Yes. Possibly, but remember, he wanted to kill him when he was an infant. When he called his beard, he called the executioner. Okay. No. Now remember over here, you have to recall all Fir'aun's like situation. So Fir'aun knows um, the sorry, I'm forgetting my translation from English to Arabic. The prophecy that he received that a person from Bani Israel would remove him from his throne. Okay? Now, it is clear probably now to Fir'aun that this is probably who? Musa. Perhaps. Coming back to him, essentially. So, why wouldn't he just get rid of him now? طيب. This discussion is happening in front of who? Huh? No, well, not Asya, but remember, Musa came now to Fir'aun and he's talking to him. Are they in a private conversation? No, if it's a private conversation, خلاص, that's it, it's done. Executioner, done, out. It was in front of people, okay? So the Coptics, the natives of Egypt were there, and by the way, I'm purposely using that word Coptics because I'm just going to say Coptics is a term that al-Aqbat is referred to all the natives of Egypt, irrelevant of what their religion is. If they are idol worshippers, if they're Jews, if they're Christians, if they are natives of Egypt, they're called Aqbat, okay? But it was in front of like a group of Aqbat, but also a population or group of Bani Israel. So this is something that is being done kind of almost like in public. If Fir'aun executes Musa right away, what's going to happen? Is he going to look in a position of strength or weakness? Because remember, Musa just presented an argument. Musa just presented a argument, right? If a person doesn't respond and just takes the other person's heads off, what does that look like? Weak, excellent. Remember, quite often, brutality is resorted to when you have a weak position. Is that right? Because if I had an intellectual debate, I will engage that and I will defeat them. But it's usually people who don't have a strong position, they resort to violence. And so perhaps, like this Imam Razi had kind of mentioned this, is that Fir'aun did not want to resort to it at that time because it will weaken his position in that argument. And he wanted to appear maybe perhaps of his arrogance, right? With the person who is equal and above Musa, and he is strong in position and debate. And so he wanted to debate him, right? And so what he did was he ignored everything that Musa did and he said, "Ma rabbukuma ya Musa," right? Now, there's Fir'aun, by the way, was a very smart guy, right? So his choice in words were purposeful. He didn't say "Man ilahukuma," he didn't say who you worship. He said "Man rabbukuma," who's your Lord, right? With that, he wanted to remind Musa alayhi salam, right, of who raised him. Because part of the word Rabb in the Arabic language includes the one who raises you. It raises you, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala obviously is the Rabbul Alameen because in reality Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that provides and nurtures. But a subcategory of that, when they say Rabbul Bayt, right, the Lord of the home, because he's the one that provides and raises and nurtures. So he's pointing to him, reminding Musa alayhi salam, who is the one that raised you, who is the one that put his favors upon you and fed you. So that's why he said, "Man rabbukuma," who's your Lord? Who's the one that raised you, right? Who's the one that provided for you? And so over here, this is a very devious way of how Fir'aun wanted to exercise trickery in front of the population, right? of Bani Israel, and he wanted to remind Musa of his favors upon him and remind the people, this is the one I raised. Who is your Lord? Who raised you? I nurtured you in my palace, right? I'm the one that fed you. Who is your Lord, Ya Musa? Right? And so the other thing is, this points also to the, like, what we mentioned, the extent of arrogance, right? The extent of arrogance. Musa alayhi salam is calling to the one Lord, the one who created everything, right? And so Fir'aun, he didn't say, Fir'aun should have asked, who is the Lord, right? He could have said, who is our Lord? He could have said it multiple different ways, right? He could have asked, who is the Lord that you're talking about? And who is our Lord that you're talking about? Okay? But he didn't do that, right? And so this hints to an arrogance. He said, Man Rabbukuma, who is your Lord? He's not my Lord, right? He's not my Lord, essentially. So this hints to, a obvious, perhaps, wallahu alam, part of arrogance. Yes. Rabbukuma, because him and Harun, because Harun came as messengers. But there's a reason that Harun is alive. Alive. Why is Harun alive? Because Fir'aun allowed him to live. Remember, it was the year that Fir'aun chose that they would live. Okay? Wallah. طيب. So how did Musa respond to this? He said, رَبُّنَا الَّذِي أَعْطَى كُلَّ شَيْءٍ خَلْقَهُ ثُمَّ هَدَى. He said, our Lord is the one that gave, I'm going to translate it as it's translated in books of tafsir, in the English ones, the one that gave things its form and guided it. And so, in Arabic, this verse has two interpretations. One of them is that the translation. Al-Khalq is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that created everything in its form. Because everything that's created has a form. Who chose that form? Is it us? No, it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? He gave it its form, its objective form, and then He subhanahu wa ta'ala guided it. The other meaning is that رَبُّنَا الَّذِي أَعْطَى خَلْقَهُ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ. This تقديم and تأخير. So what does that mean? In the Arabic language, sometimes they put things ahead or after things. But in this way, it means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that gave all the creation what it has. This is the other meaning of this. So in the Arabic language, رَبُّنَا الَّذِي أَعْطَى كُلَّ شَيْءٍ خَلْقَهُ ثُمَّ هَدَى. Right? He had given everything its shape and then He guided it. Or it could mean that رَبُّنَا الَّذِي أَعْطَى خَلْقَهُ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ. تقديم وتأخير. Right? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the creation, right? Everything. So everything is from who? From Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And both meanings are correct. Both meanings are correct, right? It does not negate, right? So, exactly. So he's saying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is who gave everything and all the creation what they need, right? And so there is no human being that can claim that I have favors on you, right? So essentially, he essentially, that argument that he presented or he's trying to present, he eliminated it, right? And so it's almost like there's an inherent challenge to Musa in that statement also. He's essentially telling him, are you the one that gave all the creation what it needs? Are you the one that gave all the creation its form? Are you the one that bestowed the favors that they have, all of it? So there's an inherent challenge in that, right? That is, it's a very subtle. People who reflect on this, that will kind of understand this, right? And if you are not, if you don't qualify to any of these, then how can you claim, right, that you are the Lord? And so then he said, ثُمَّ هَدَى, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided it, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided those creation. And subhanAllah, this is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not just create us and leave us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us and provided us with guidance, right? Whether it is our innate predisposition to understand and realize that there's a creator, and then sending the messengers to remind us of this, and the guidelines and legislations that are beneficial for us, that we need to go through this world so that it can survive until the hereafter, right? If we follow that path. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us and gave us the necessary map by which we would reach safely to the hereafter. And this is one of the blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. طيب. And so, this is one statement from Musa alayhi salam that showed, Fir'aun, who is it truly the one who is giving these blessings upon the creation. He said, رَبُّنَا الَّذِي أَعْطَى كُلَّ شَيْءٍ خَلْقَهُ ثُمَّ هَدَى, right? That's it, they're exact, right? So it pointed to the lordship of Allah, but also the bounties of Allah, right? To the lordship of Allah and the bounties of Allah. And so you neither have either that one or the ones. And so Fir'aun then wanted to kind of escape from that argument that Musa alayhi salam, because it really kind of pretty much trumped him, right? And so he can't say, so Fir'aun can't say, I'm the one that gave the creation its form, or I'm the one that gave everything to the creation and guided them. He can't say that, right? But he said something interesting. He said, فَمَا بَالُ الْقُرُونِ الْأُولَى, right? What is the case with the former generations? What does that have to do with anything? No, by the way, this is a very smart misconception from, it's a very devious move from Fir'aun, right? What did he just do over here? Remember, he's talking to this is like people sitting there, right? From Bani Israel and from the Coptics. Bani Israel will follow Musa, right? But this statement, what is he asking for? ما بين القرون الأولى, what is he asking about? What about the previous nations? What about it? Come on. طيب. Fir'aun responded, he said, فَمَا بَالُ الْقُرُونِ الْأُولَى. What about the previous generations? What is he asking about? Huh? Not who they worshipped. What's going to happen to them? Like, you are telling me, come here. You are telling me, I'm a messenger, worship Allah, right? So I would enter Jannah. What about the previous people? Now, why am I saying that this is a very, devious question from Fir'aun? طيب. So Musa alayhi salam, right? So Fir'aun is asking Musa a more of a historical statement about the previous nations. So he's asking them, right, the previous nations or people that came before the present. So these people who are there, they have fathers and forefathers. Okay? They have fathers and forefathers. And they're sitting there, listening to Musa. Okay? That conversation is happening. Bani Israel are there, the Coptics are there. So he's telling him, our forefathers and our fathers, are they in Jannah or the hellfire? So if Musa responds, he says they are in the hellfire because they will led astray, how will that emotionally affect the people that are there? Right? Like, what? Our parents in the hellfire? What is this? Why should we follow you, right? And if he says they are in Jannah, then why should I follow you? I'm just going to follow what they did. Right? Is that clear to everybody? So why are you calling? What's the point of calling me? Just leave me be. Right? And who I'm worshiping with my parents. So it's and every time, subhanAllah, I look at this, Fir'aun is a very intelligent person, extremely intelligent. This is not a person who was very easy. طيب. And so when you put him in that position, what was Musa's response? Right? He said, علمها عند ربي في كتاب لا يضل ربي ولا ينسى. He said that knowledge is with Allah, recorded in a book, and He does not err nor does He forget. Right? And so what he did over here was he neutralized this. Right? He silenced him. He essentially said, what's the worry about them? Allah knows. Right? Allah knows. And there's no fault in that I don't know what's happening to them. This is something from the past. Allah knows what it is. Let's focus on the present, what is important, what is here, right? And subhanAllah, there was a beautiful response from Musa alayhi salam when he came to that aspect of it. طيب. Now the continuation of those verses, right, is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض وجعل لكم فيه سبلا, and all the end of it is this is like verses from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He wants to point our attention to to everything around us, right? To the universe around us, from the creation, the earth that we walk on, the rain that comes down, that results in the food and crops that we are that we're eating, that we graze our flocks from it. All this is from who? From Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And shouldn't He be the one then deserved that we worship, right? And that we have a day of judgment and day of judgment. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pointing, when these verses, the whole idea of it is to point that He is the creator and only Him, and so only Him that He should be worshipped, right? Now, I'm going to switch just for a little bit, if you guys give me a few moments, to Surah Al-Shu'ara, because there's a bit of an interesting continuation to this, right? Fir'aun, when Musa alayhi salam told him, our Lord, right? He said, أَلَمْ نُرَبِّكَ فِينَا وَلِيدًا, right? He said, didn't we raise you among us as a child? أَلَمْ نُرَبِّكَ فِينَا وَلِيدًا وَلَبِثْتَ فِينَا مِنْ عُمُرِكَ سِنِينَ وَفَعَلْتَ فَعَلَتَكَ الَّتِي فَعَلْتَ وَأَنْتَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. And so Fir'aun, essentially in the initial part of the debate, what he said to Musa, he said, didn't we not raise you among us as a child? And you remained among us for years from your life, and then you did your deed and you are ungrateful? So he's telling him, we raised you, and so this is how you deal with us? What is this, right? He's blaming Musa, right? You remember that Coptic that you killed, right? This is a very interesting argument, by the way. So essentially what he's telling him, he's like, you're coming and saying you're a prophet, right? And you want to call us to this. Don't you remember what you did, right? After we raised you, you ungrateful person, and you killed the person, now you want to do this? This is very similar to when we see this quite often, when, subhanAllah, a person would be heedless for many years, and then Allah guides him. And he then tries to tell people what is, come. What you're doing is wrong, come. And they tell him, you forgot who we were. We used to sit together at the, the bar, or we used to go out together, or do all these things, right? Is that a proper argument? It's not. This is a very, Pharaohish, right, argument of saying, I'm not going to follow you because of your past. It's an excuse to refuse. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum, right, all of them, what were they before they became Muslims? Mushrikeen, right? Umar ibn al-Khattab, what did he worship before he worshipped Allah? Idols, right? In fact, he used to laugh at himself about what he used to do. He would carry an idol with him from dates while traveling. He would worship it. When he gets hungry, he eats it. Wanted to kill him. But that's never an excuse. When Allah guides somebody, we don't look at the individual, we look at the truth that they bring. And wallahi, this is something that's important, because quite often, sometimes what stops us from following the truth is our hatred to that person, or our view of that person. It doesn't matter who that person is. What matters is what they're saying, right? We take what is right from whomever it is, no matter what, even if it's from the shaitan. Forget about the messenger, right? We should not reject the truth because of whom it comes from. It should never be like that. And sometimes the reality is we fall into that trap, right? Somebody tells us something, but we don't accept it because of who they are, okay? And that, subhanAllah, it doesn't necessarily that it has to be, we hate that person, but it's just because, just how it is, right? And this happens within families, okay? Parents would advise their kids and tell them this, do this, don't do that, right? And they tend to be stubborn about it. And then all of a sudden one day they come, Mama, Baba, do you believe, inshallah, I'm doing this because of this? And they're like, we've been telling you this for years. What changed? His friend told him. It's the same message. It didn't all of a sudden become the truth. It's the same message, but that child was rejecting it because it came from the parents. He accepted it because it came from the friends. We see that between also spouses, right? The wife would be telling her husband something for years, or the husband would be telling her, his wife for years, right? And whatever. And then all of a sudden, they come home and they say something. Why? Because their friends told them, right? The truth didn't change, but it's who it's from. The Sheikh is laughing, right? But that's the reality, right? Now that gets a bit more complicated when it comes from people that they don't sit well with us, that we don't like. They just get on our nerves. طيب? I don't like the way that they talk. I don't like the way that they dress. Even though they have the truth with them, right? But because of those feelings, it complicates it further that it's almost we will never accept it from them, right? We shouldn't deal with it that way, right? That's not an excuse. We should focus on, be objective. Is what they're saying right or wrong? And it's very beneficial when it comes in the form of a constructive criticism. Like we become very defensive when somebody says something to us that is more of a criticism. I hope it's usually more of constructive, that we always fall into the defensive, position. Why not just listen, calm down, look at it. Is it true or is it not? Just simply before we respond. If it's not true, then respond. If it's true, then that person did you a favor. They did you a favor. I just wanted to comment about this quickly regarding this. Now Musa alayhi salam, when he was accused, he said, he didn't deny it. He said, قَدْ فَعَلْتُهَا إِذًا وَأَنَا مِنَ الضَّالِّينَ. He said, I did it then while I was from those who were astray. So he's telling him, obviously I did it it was a mistake. It was not something that was on purpose. And then it continues, and the verse continues, فَفَرَرْتُ مِنْكُمْ لَمَّا خِفْتُكُمْ فَوَهَبَ لِي رَبِّي حُكْمًا وَجَعَلَنِي مِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. And so I fled when I feared you, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted me, right, hukmah, wisdom, and prophethood, and appointed me as a messenger. And then he said, تِلْكَ نِعْمَةٌ تَمُنُّهَا عَلَيّْ أَنَّ عَبَّدْتَ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيل. He said, and this is a favor which you remind me that you have enslaved the children of Israel. So he's refuting the whole thing about you bestowed a favor upon me. He said, what favor is this? That you enslaved Bani Israel? That you fed me but starved them? That you gave me shelter but treat them like slaves? What kind of, what kind of favor is this, right? And we have to remind ourselves about this, is that we have to look at the greater picture of things. Just because somebody did us a favor doesn't mean we forget all their transgressions, right? We have to remember this, especially in the climate that we live in, right? We'll give you freedom of religion, but let us kill your brothers and sisters, right? We will do this, but allow us to do something else. We have to be extremely careful about this kind of rhetoric, right? And not accept it, right? We cannot be selfish. Just because we are able to get some sort of favor, we forget our ummah and our brothers and sisters everywhere else. We'll stop here, inshallah. I think I went over what I wanted to go. We're going to talk about next time the Sahara, right, of Fir'aun and the whole discussion. But next week, inshallah, we do have a guest, a workshop, inshallah, is happening. This person who's coming in, I know this person, mashallah, he is from, subhanAllah, it's slipping my mind. But it's an institution for blind Muslims, right? It's a workshop of how we deal with the disabled Muslims, best way of dealing with them and stuff like that. And one of the things, the beautiful thing they do is they create masahif with Braille language so that the Muslims would be able, who are blind, to be able to read it. That will be a workshop, inshallah, that Friday. The following Friday, inshallah, we'll be continuing. But please, come for that event. Show our support. Those brothers and sisters that they come, they do need our support. He himself is blind, by the way. The brother who's coming is blind. So of course, if you're not here, he's not going to see you. But let's show, inshallah, the respect and hosting of our community to him, inshallah. جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. اللهم نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة. اللهم اغفر جمعنا هذا وارحمنا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم اجعل هذا جمعنا جمعا مرحوما ولا تجعل فينا شقيا ولا محروما، ولا تترك لنا حاجة إلا لبيتها لنا، وارفع عنا البلاء يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم انصر إخواننا المستضعفين في كل مكان، وانصر إخواننا المستضعفين في غزة وفي فلسطين. اللهم رد كيد أعدائهم في نحورهم، اللهم لا ترفع لهم راية ومزقهم كل ممزق. اللهم اجعل تدميرهم في تدبيرهم، إنك أنت على كل شيء قدير. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى اللهم وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. جزاكم الله خير. We have chai at the back for you guys. You can have some chai, socialize with each other, inshallah, and grab something.